everyone, welcome to another video. Before we get started today, there is only one shout out, so thank you to Joanna for subscribing. Today we're going to be looking at the settings in the first episode of the Sweeney. So just like I did for Luther, I'm going to break down these settings and discuss why they might be important in case this comes up in your paper 2 exam. Now there are more settings here for the Sweeney than there are for Luther, so it's going to take a little bit longer, but I've not added as much detail, so you guys can go back to some of these settings and see if you can add your own ideas to this as well. So we start off in Jenny's apartment. Now initially when we first see this, it seems quite cluttered and quite sort of messy, and I think this is designed to represent how much of a mess Regan is in the morning, being late for work, having to borrow a car, and then this sort of sets up how big his success is later on. It could also represent the fact that Regan again is not overly concerned with appearance and is more focused on doing the job and doing the job well. Now later on when we see Jenny's apartment, this seems quite bright, quite welcoming, which reflects Jenny's personality and her nature more so than Regan's. We also get that contrast and that opposition to the aggression that's seen by Merrick and Brooker in that scene, because that's obviously very out of place compared to Jenny and the sort of person that she is. Now the police station as a whole seems quite bright, quite welcoming. Initially we see it as quite empty, which makes it seem like a bigger environment and also raises enigma and questions because we wonder where the other officers are, but later we see it full of activity, which is more expected and more conventional of a setting such as this. Now the garage that Billy and Stupid work from seems very stereotypical for the London location. We get a lot of masculinity through the garage, and this is very similar to the garage that Brooker works in as well, because you do get evidence of sort of typical, stereotypical, conventional calendars and images of sort of scantily clad women that are around the walls. But for Billy and Stupid, their garage provides an element of sort of opposition, because it does provide a legitimate business, but instead it's used for criminal activity. So there's the option for Billy and Stupid's characters to sort of go straight and to have this legitimate enterprise. However, we see it in this setting as being more criminal. Now Kemble's office is very high class. The colour palette is very rich, very although it's very dark, we've got a lot of sort of colours like mahogany, and we've got these sort of gold tones, which shows how high class he is, and it also mirrors his own dress codes as well, particularly in his suit and his appearance, and this adds to that overall command that he seems to have of the people who are around him and who work for him. This contrasts greatly to the store cupboard where we see Regan, and a lot of these settings I think I'm taking in chronological order, so we do jump from seeing Kemble in his office to seeing the store cupboard where Regan's changing his trousers, which again puts these two characters at odds, but also adds to the sort of comic relief of the situation, because we wouldn't expect Regan to be in this position. The commander's office, very minimal. The decor matches the rest of the station, so to an extent we could argue that he is not too far above the characters that we're seeing, because his office is very similar to the other places that we see within the station. It would be unlikely, I think, that you would get a question based on the commander and their office, but I've decided to include it just in case and to sort of cover all bases. Soldier's shop, very unusual for an informant, and we wouldn't expect an informant to be in a shop like that, and we've got a load of enigma in this shop as a whole. So obviously it's sort of looking at war memorabilia, but we've got the swastikas, which would raise sort of different feelings and emotions within different members of the audience. It's quite cluttered, quite cramped, crowded, sort of flamboyant, I guess, which matches the soldier's personality, although it's sort of flamboyant in a different way to some of the other characters that we see. Now the train station where we have the chase scene obviously adds to this suspense and tension throughout the chase scene, because we have opportunities where we think Billy's going to get away, where we think Billy's going to get caught, so we're constantly as an audience second guessing what's going to happen throughout this sequence that we see here. But it also allows the audience a sort of level of relatability, because we can see the name of the station, Peckham Rye, and so people who are living in that area get to feel a little bit more connected to the show as a whole. We also have the what I assume is a racetrack, and I'm happy to be corrected if that's the case, where they meet Driscoll with the greyhound. Again, common convention of crime drama with its links to gambling and sort of petty crime, so it does match the character who they're meeting. Likewise, the marketplace, conventional for the London setting, stereotypical location for informants. So again, we've got settings particularly for the sort of minor characters, or characters who I would consider to be minor, like Driscoll, like Edie Driscoll, like Soldier. We've got them really matching the characters. So the setting reveals a lot about the personality of the characters. It also adds to this idea of them being, in this instance, informants as well. Now, the interview room, where we see first Carter but then Regan interviewing Billy's mum, is non-stereotypical. It seems warmer, brighter, larger than we would expect, particularly as a modern audience, an interview room to be like. Now, one of the reasons that it could be portrayed as being more homely and being brighter and warmer is to try and get the characters to talk, and it makes them more likely to talk. And we could have that as a sort of direct comparison between Luther and the Sweeney, which I will do a video on, where the interview room that Alice is in is quite dark, dismal, and she doesn't reveal anything, whereas the warmer and brighter interview room in the Sweeney helps Billy's mum, Mrs. Martin, to talk and to give them the information that they need. We then have, very briefly, we see Prosser's house, which is very high class, emphasises his status because it's, first of all, we have this really long driveway leading up to the house. We then have the size of the house being emphasised. We then have the length of the garden being emphasised to show how high class and how much status this man has, which ultimately contrasts to his criminal activity, because it's something that we wouldn't expect to see of somebody who has a legitimate business or who has a high class business like Prosser. And then we have this waste ground, which is sort of stereotypical not only for the violence that happens, but also for sort of criminal activity or sort of this tension and suspense that we have. But it also seems like quite an appropriate location for the climax of the narrative as a whole, particularly given the downfall that we see of, literally and sort of metaphorically, of Kemble when he falls backwards after being shot. So very sort of appropriate, and what we would expect as an audience for a setting where this sort of fight and this sort of battle is going to take place. Hopefully that was helpful for you guys. We've got quite a few key terms today. Maybe go back through the settings that I've listed, add it to your own notes, watch the episode again and see if you can add any more detail for your own thoughts and your own ideas and opinions to these settings that I've picked out here. As I said in the previous video, I'm hoping to do a video at least once a week, hopefully more than that if I can. So if you haven't already, please subscribe, hit the button below and hit the bell icon next to it so that you get instant notifications every time I do post another video. If you do subscribe, you also get a shout out in the next video, so please do. You can also ask any questions that you need through the comments section below or through Twitter at media_revision. I do read every single comment and I do try and reply in some way, shape or form. So if you do have any problems, just let me know and I will see you guys later for another video.